Hi everyone, I'm Henrik and this is Red Eyes Radio based out of Sweden. If you are new to the program, we cover a lot of different subjects that we find both interesting and important, from fringe to more down to earth. And many of our programs are designed to make you question and re-evaluate what you think you know. In the past, we've covered a lot on the shadow side of the Scandinavian countries, specifically Sweden, that you, I, and others are told to admire for their egalitarian values, good economics, and corrupt free politics. Well, it's all lies, and it's only a few of many very well-kept secrets of the big government tyrannies up in the north. These kinds of stories you'll never hear about in the state-subsidized media, and therefore many people do not believe it is happening. Well, none are more hopelessly enslaved than those who falsely believe they are free. One of many cases we've covered on this was the abduction of Dominic Johansson by Swedish childcare services, an example of how an all-powerful bureaucracy with no oversight have managed to destroy an entire family. Today we're going to talk about a related story that has been going on in Finland. We have Warren McLachlan with us from Australia to discuss the tragic story of how a failed marriage with a Finnish woman who consequently placed their children in the care of the Finnish government and their pill-pushing psychiatrists developed into a one-man battle against the state to take his children back to live with their father, the parent who cares about the children in Australia. Welcome, Warren. Thank you so much for coming on Red Eyes Radio here with us today. It's great to have you here. This is going to be an interesting story. So first of all, thank you for coming on then, Warren.
Well, yeah, no worries. I appreciate it very much. Thank you, Henry.
You bet. So let's just kind of introduce your story here to our audience a little bit, and how you what has happened to you, and obviously your situation overall when you came up to Scandinavia and everything else, how you met your wife, whatever you're comfortable with kind of laying the ground, if you will, here for us, Warren. Please go ahead and do so.
Okay. Well, in 1998, at the beginning of 1998, I decided to take a holiday to Europe. And I went to Finland, and I met a woman named Kaisu, and I found her very attractive, and I fell in love with her, and we got married, and I took her back to Australia, and it was like a fairy tale, really. It was the happiest time of my life, apart from my children. But anyway. So we got back to Australia, and our first son, William, was born in November 1998, and he was an intelligent, handsome, healthy child. And then in the beginning of 1999, I noticed that Kaisu was homesick, so I sent her and baby William back to Finland to visit her family. And they came back about a month later, and life went back to normal. And I noticed that Kaisu found William to be a burden. And he was up to all sorts of, before he could walk, less than 6 months old, he was crawling all around the apartment, and for example, he would crawl into the kitchen cupboards and throw everything on the floor, and then Kaisu would put it all back in. He'd crawl back in and throw it all on the floor again. And, one time Kaisu would start the vacuum up, and he would pounce on the vacuum cleaner, and he managed to break it. I don't know how, because there was no visible signs of damage, but after that it would only work on one speed, and it would let out an ugly howl. And I didn't worry, but eventually, years later, it burnt out, and it was a horrible stink, and it set off the fire alarm. But anyway, one day I was sitting at the kitchen table, and William crawled over, and he was about 8 months old, and he grabbed the hairs on my legs and he stood himself up. And I was impressed with that. He was a wonderful child. And anyway, Kaisu simply wanted him to sit still and shut up. And so she began pinching him and slapping him and pulling his hair and biting him, and I tried many times to correct her behavior, but it only provoked her, and I really didn't know what to do about it, because I did love Kaisu, and I loved William, and life went on, and so year 2000 we bought a house, and And then 2001, November, Kaisu took baby William to Finland again. And this time she phoned me from Finland in December 2001, and she said, I'm pregnant. And I said, well, that's great. And so then in January 2002, she said she was too sick to fly home, and then she was too pregnant to fly home, and then she said she'd be home. Then baby Mikhail was born in July, and he was intelligent and healthy and handsome, and so I was very happy. Two beautiful, wonderful baby boys, and
right.
Anyway, yeah, and so, but then she said she'd be home after the christening, and then she said she applied for a divorce, and then she said that there was a chance to save our marriage if I came to Finland. So I worked very hard for the rest of the year, and I saved my money, and I landed in Finland in January 2003, and she told me that she only promised me the chance to save our marriage to delay a Hague application for international child abduction. And anyway, so I asked for Mikhail's birth certificate, and she said no. So I went to the hospital, I think it was Porvoo Hospital, and they said no. And I don't understand. I'm the father. We're married. I've got a passport, all these things, but no. And so I eventually tracked down some other government department, and they gave it to me. And I wasn't keeping records at that stage, but the man told me that some other person in the legal section of the Finnish government was giving Kaisu advice on how to stall me on this, to make it harder for me to make a successful Hague application. So that's what all this stalling was about. But unfortunately, I didn't get his name. But anyway, so that was 2002, and so I went. I asked Kaisu to come home. Obviously, she said no. I asked her to let me take William home. She said no. So I went back to Australia after about 3 weeks, I think, and then.
Did you see your wife and your children when you were there at that time?
I did.
Yeah.
I did. Yeah.
Did you stay with them?
No. I rented some student accommodation, but once I asked Kaisu for the once I obtained the birth certificate, and I went to see the Australian Embassy, and they told me that I should register Mikhail as an Australian citizen. So I did.
Because William was, right? Because he was born in Australia, correct?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, Australian passport. Yeah. And anyway, so once Kaisu became aware that I had this this birth certificate and I'd registered Mikhail as an Australian citizen, that was whatever was left there of our relationship, that killed it, and I wasn't allowed to visit her home anymore. And so I was only allowed to meet with the children in government buildings from that point on. And then, so then in August 2003, she divorced me in a Finnish court, and the divorce court order said that I was allowed to have custody of my children 1 month per year, but only in Finland, and only if I surrendered my passport to my ex-wife. And so, and they also said I was allowed to have unlimited information from all Finnish government people concerning my children. And anyway, so I worked hard, and I saved my money, and I arrived in Finland in the Finnish summer of 2004, and I said, well, here I am. Can I have my 1 month's custody? And by this stage, Kaisu had begun dumping responsibility for the care of our children onto psychiatrists. And I was very alarmed with this because I was familiar with the history of psychiatry, and I was not impressed. So anyway, so I arrived in Finland, and I said, well, can I have my 1 month's custody? And Kaisu and the psychiatrist said, well, we don't actually care about the court order. And no, you can't. And so I went to see a lawyer, and we began a court case to improve, to get my children back to Australia, and failing that, to place my children in the care of the closest possible of their many Finnish family members. And we had 50 of them at our wedding in Helsinki. So, but also I was seeking improved parental rights if I couldn't get my children back. And Kaisu and the psychiatrists, they counterattacked with demands to deny me all further communication with my children and take away their last names.
Jeez.
Mm.
Wow. So let me ask you this, if you don't mind, then, because it sounds like something changed with Kais as well. Do you know if she had a history of being, mentally ill or any problems in that way since before?
Well, I was not aware of such a thing, but I did notice that she was easily angered. She had a bad temper, but I also liked her sense of humor, and I genuinely did love her. But yeah, she just seemed to find William to be a burden, and she was very easily annoyed by anything that he did. Basically, any sound or movement pretty much was a reason to punish him.
Yeah.
And so anyway, so in August in 2004, in the summer of 2004, my lawyer advised me to drop the case because we could only expect a worse result. And so anyway,
what would be worse in this case?
Well, for example, the children would lose their last names.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's probably about the only thing they could have done to me, I think, because they could have totally denied me all contact with the children. I had very little contact, but they could have totally denied the contact.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, and so anyway, I began writing letters to making criminal complaints against these psychiatrists to the Finnish Justice Department. And I have some very interesting statements, which perhaps later at the end of the interview I would like to read just pieces of them from these psychiatrists.
Sure.
They say the most amazing things, But anyway, so I was complaining to the Finnish Justice Department that my children were being kidnapped and that they intended to drug my children. Because, I know the pattern of psychiatry, and so I was hoping that by forewarning the Finnish Justice Department that would scare the psychiatrists off, at least to some degree, and hopefully they wouldn't drug my children, and then maybe one day I could get them back in one piece,
Yeah.
But the Finnish Justice Department simply didn't care. And so, even though I've accurately predicted everything since the beginning and right up to the present day, over and over and over again, to every Finnish government department, thousands of times, literally, they just don't care. And what it comes down to is that the Finnish Justice Department tells me, most of them simply tell me I need to talk to somebody else. But if they can't ignore me, what they say to me is that basically, the Finnish Justice Department will not make a criminal charge against a Finnish psychiatrist when they're acting as a psychiatrist, unless they get a complaint from Valvira. Now, Valvira is the Medical Investigation Board, and I've been to that office twice, and I've met one of their senior investigators twice. Now, this man, this Marcus Henriksson, he was one of their senior investigators, and guess what? He's a psychiatrist. Yeah, so you have to complain to a psychiatrist about a psychiatrist, and if that psychiatrist thinks there's criminal activity on the part of the other psychiatrist in the way he treats his patient, then he will make a complaint to the police, and only then will the police make a criminal charge against that psychiatrist. Yeah.
So that, well, I'm going to let you continue your story here and what happened, and I'll kind of interject with questions about that later. So just go ahead, Warren. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So anyway, he also told me another very interesting point. He said, we don't normally investigate unless there's a death. So, in other words, a psychiatrist can literally do anything to his patient, excluding death, and only then will val vira investigate, and then it's a psychiatrist investigating a psychiatrist.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, so I also began writing letters to, phone calls and letters, and I've door knocked countless government people in Finland, like, the Justice Department and the psychiatrists and the social workers, and also I've contacted media and human rights groups and lawyers, and I wasn't able to find a human rights group anywhere in the world that could do anything effective about these Finnish psychiatrists. And so anyway, lawyers, there's some hope there, but unfortunately I don't have a lot of money, and these trips to Finland have been very expensive, and they've consumed most of my spare money.
Yeah.
But I did find a lawyer in Finland, and his name is Tero, and he's a kind-hearted soul, and we've become friends, and he's not a specialist in human rights, but he does deliver my mail to my children, and he does collect communication from the psychiatrists for me. And these psychiatrists, by the way, and these social workers, even though I have this court order that says I have unlimited information from the Finnish government about my children, they almost never answer my questions. Sometimes I get letters in the mail years later that tell me bits and pieces. And for example, I've been asking these social workers and psychiatrists since the year 2003 to place my children in the care of the closest possible their many Finnish family members. And also I've been asking them, have you ever made any attempt to do this? And they simply refuse to answer the question. So it's reasonable to assume they have not. So anyway, my lawyer also, he delivers, I send mail packages to my children, like, with food and organic food and toys and clothes and things. And he delivers the packages to them. And recently they've told me that I'm not allowed to have any more photos of my children because they know I'm writing a book. And they've been drugging William since 2006. And
why have they been doing this? What is their reasoning here?
Well, they claim he's restless and aggressive. Now, I don't know about you, but if my mother took me to the other side of the world and then dumped me, I might be restless and aggressive too.
Well, exactly. And this is one of my questions here. I mean, where are they today? Where's William and Mikael today?
Okay, well, William is perhaps I could just think this will very shortly answer your question, because okay, I sort of got a timeline summary in my head.
Definitely. So, sorry about that. Go ahead.
No, that's cool. So 2005, 2006, I simply continued seeking to contact people to help my children. And 2006, I became aware of the drugging of William on the basis that he's restless and aggressive. And then 2007, I visited Finland again. By this time, William was put in a place called Tamarini Reception Home, and the manager, Marjana Tillman, she wrote me a letter and said that I'm not allowed to send a doc, because I made a request, and she said, you're not allowed to send a doctor of your choice, a human rights activist of your choice, a lawyer of your choice, or a religious person of your choice to visit your own children. Yeah. So if the police will not investigate these people, and I'm not allowed to send, people of my, respectable people to inquire about their well-being, then these people can literally do anything short of murder my children if they want to. And I couldn't possibly imagine a better place in the entirety of Finland for a sadist or a pedophile to hide, because they are literally above the law, like nowhere else.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, anyway, beginning in 2000 and when Mikhail was 2 years old, Kaisu tried to put him in speech therapy, which I thought was rather bizarre. I've never been able to get a document on that. I keep trying. But anyway, so that tracking forward again to 2007, Williams in this children's home. My children had been in and out of government homes and foster homes beginning in 2002, actually, to varying degrees. But in Williams' case, it became permanent in 2007. And I think Kaisu basically, she wants to have a little bit of contact with the children, but she thinks of them as a burden. She's more content to spend. She needs to have a job. She likes to work. She likes to do that, and she likes to have a social life. And she likes to see the children occasionally, but she doesn't. One of the reasons she dumped the children on the state was to make it harder for me to communicate to them, because she simply wants to forget me. And she doesn't want to communicate to me at all. She hasn't communicated to me for years.
Do you know why this is the case? Why did this happen all of a sudden? Because it seemed to come kind of out of the blue, as you explained it anyway.
Well, the Kaiser was very homesick.
Yeah.
And so basically she just, I don't know, I guess she just decided that she was bored with me, or didn't love me as much, or didn't love me anymore, or whatever. But anyway, so
Warren, you felt that you have not gotten an answer to why this happened, correct? That's how you feel at this stage.
Well, I think that basically she fell out of love with me, but I think the main driver was the fact that she wanted to live in Finland.
Okay.
And I offered to move to Finland when I was there in 2003, but she said no. And see, basically, our arguments stemmed from the fact that I was trying to stop Kaisu from harming William, which began in 1999, slapping and screaming and pinching and
yeah,
pulling his hair, and she could scream like a banshee. He would shake with fear when she screamed at him.
Jeez.
And she was a big woman, but anyway, so that was a source of argument. My attempts to make her not hurt William. I would stop her whenever I was close enough to do so.
Yeah.
But anyway, so 2007, William's in this children's home, and I don't know. I think Kaiser was mainly caring for Mikhail at that stage, but 2008, just more of this. When obviously I stayed in Finland for I think 2 months in 2007. 2008, I'm contacting people. Will you help my children, please? And by this stage, I begin to discover computers, and a book was starting to form, because these letters to these government people in Finland, they just kept getting longer, and they had to get sections and headings and whatever. And one day I finally realized, well, this is a book. And so 2009, I was in Finland for the summer, and both of my children by this stage were put in a children's home called Turleton in the suburb of Kauniainen. And it's a beautiful place. It's close to Helsinki, and there's $1 million homes on the lake there. And the home was on 1/4 acre, and it was 2 stories with a basement and 7 bedrooms, and it was very nice, But the social veneer was very nice, But one of the staff members, Jukka Myrtainen, he told me that 4 out of 7 of the children were being drugged.
Did he say with what?
Oh, well, there's a long list. No, but I've got references to at least 10 different drugs. And
Is it mostly like SSRIs and things like that, or what is the
Yeah,
type?
yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Well, you've got Levasin, Seroquel, Zyprexa, Atarax. I can't Risperdal. I could.
Yeah.
That's what's that, about 4 or 5. But I think they've given William at least 10 different types of drugs, and the last I heard, they were actually giving him 5 at the same time.
So your Warren, your main, well, beyond the fact that you're not allowed to see, I mean, there are layers here of things that you don't agree with, of course, but one of the main issues right now currently is that the form of psychiatry, as you're talking about, that they're being subjected to with the medication and everything, that's what you're initially now are objecting to and trying to just get them off that stage 1, correct? That's like the first thing that has to be done, correct?
Oh, yeah. Well, like I said, I tried to prevent it before it 4 years before it even happened.
Yeah.
You know. And because I like I said, if I could just keep them away from drugs, maybe one day I could get them back in one piece.
Yeah.
You know, and so 2009, there I am in this nice children's home. Both my children are there, and I really don't see the justification for putting Mikhail there. And they claimed both of my children have Asperger's syndrome, and I've done a bit of research on this, and trust me, if you was to be put into a room with a psychiatrist and he was to get the list of symptoms of Asperger's syndrome and he was to stare at you for a day, you would have at least one of those symptoms.
Well, this is the case with all these, diseases that they're inventing now, psychologically and whatnot, as excuses to get you on the pills, of course. But yeah. So basically, this place, Pelastikar Lapset, it's interesting too because it's Finnish for Save the Children, and I consider that a form of gallows humour, rather similar to the Arbeit marked Frei above the gates of Auschwitz. Work makes free, and I think it's literally. I think it may have started out with good intentions, this organisation, but I think literally today it would be an in-joke. Save the children, ha ha ha. So they, gallows humour. So basically, what you've got the drug industry and the medical industry and at least some children's charities, and they're basically kidnapping children and drugging them, and they're basically billing the taxpayer for it. And so, I would be very interested to know, like, if you added up for example, one day in this place, Turleton, William received a mail package from my friend Ule. I have a friend called Ule, and he's been delivering mail to my children too. And it was the saddest thing, because in the package there was a packet of organic raisins, which we call them sultanas. But anyway, William liked them very much, and these social workers decided he couldn't have them, and so William snatched them and fled to the rooftop. And he's a very smart boy, and he said he was issuing his list of demands. If you don't let me keep my sultanas, I'll jump off the roof, and if you don't let me do this and this and if you don't stop doing that, I'll jump off the roof, etc. And anyway, they sent the fire brigade and the ambulance there, and the result was that he ended up in hospital, and I have statements from these psychiatrists where they admit to pinning him to the ground for 2.5 hours at a time, and because he's restless and aggressive, and I said to them, look, this is complete insanity. I said, look, if I was caring for William, because I've got longer legs, and I could simply, if he was restless and aggressive, I could simply set him free and chase after him and make sure he didn't hurt himself or break anything. And I'm sure that in 5 or 10 minutes he'd calm down. And then I would say, William, my son, what would you like to do? Let's have some fun. What would you like to do? And I'm sure everything would be just fine. And these psychiatrists accuse my children, particularly William. Fortunately, Mikhail has escaped drugging, and it looks like he's going to be safe, which is excellent. But that I'll get into that in a moment. So they accuse William of having extreme behaviour problems,
And during my 2003, 2004, 2007, 2009, 2011 visits to Finland, I did not witness William or Mikhail having any behaviour problems at all.
So you haven't been shown the proof for this, if you will?
No. It just, that reminds me, back to 2004, I was, and I will get back to Mikhail, but so 2004, the main thing is William, of course, he's in such danger, but
yeah.
I was in this place called Simpukka Päiväkoti in 2004, and I was only allowed to see my children for 2 hours at a time, twice a week, if I surrendered my passport to the manager of the children's home, Oti Ojala.
For the time that you were there, or what?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
That's right. And so it must have been on my 5th visit, I think. I was preparing to leave, and I heard my son William's voice, and I stuck my head around the corner, and there he was on a kindergarten teacher's lap, and her name was Marit Hirvonen, and William was struggling to get away, and he headbutted her, and she punched him in the face, right? And I saw all this in a half a second flat. Yeah. And anyway, I went and complained to the manager, Oti Ojala, and I said, that woman just punched my son William in the face. And this Marit Hirvonen, she said, yes, but he was biting, scratching, things like this. And I said in a loud, angry voice, I said, I do not care. You do not punch a 5-year-old boy in the face.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
It's okay. It's all right. Take your time, Warren. It's okay.
Anyway, so Oti Ojala, she kicked me out of the kindergarten.
Yeah.
And so I went to the police station, the Vanta police station, and I made a criminal complaint with the senior criminal investigator, Jay Jurinen. And after I made my complaint, the Oti Ojala, she made a complaint against me with Jay Jurinen, and she accused me of picking up a leather medicine ball, and it was 1 meter tall, and it weighed about 50 kilos. It's amazing what they've got in Finland. I mean, the children's homes and the kindergartens, whatever, they got everything. I mean, it's not that we're poor in Australia, but we don't spend as much on that sort of stuff as they do. And
well, that's because it's government running the whole show up there in all of Scandinavia and Finland, including. So they have all the expenses paid for.
Yeah. But this 1 meter tall leather medicine ball, it would have been a great thing to have when I was a kid, but it must have weighed about 50 kilos. Anyway, they also, this Oti Ojala accused me of picking this thing up and throwing it as hard as I could at both of my children, both of my infant children.
While you were there? Is that what you...
Yeah, while I was there.
Okay.
And at the kindergarten. And this was after I made my complaint. And I said to Jay Jurinen, look, she's only trying to discredit me as a witness.
Sure. Yeah.
And I said, look, for one thing, if Ojala was to back me up on Hirvonen's admission, she would be criminally charged. And then if the media got involved, Ojala might lose her job as the manager of the kindergarten.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So obviously there's a vested interest there.
Yeah.
And I said, look, how about we go to the kindergarten and let's see if I'm physically capable of picking up this ball. Although I could pick up 50 kilos, I don't know, it was such an awkward shape, and I don't know if I actually could pick it up and throw it. And I said, well, let's go there and see if I can, because I don't think I can, and that will establish the fact that she's lying.
Yeah. And
he said no. And so he decided that Hirvonen, that Ojala was telling the truth and that I was lying. And I believe this was the easiest way out, the least politically damaging, certainly for the kindergarten, but perhaps for him as well. I mean, I don't know. Could this have repercussions on his career if he, but anyway, that's another subject. But so
no, but it's a good point. They're all connected together, and if they're all in for whatever reason is trying to keep your uh, children there or other children there for the sake of, who knows what, or experimentation. Or as you said, this is, they're protecting each other. That's just the way it goes, and specifically when you have government agencies like this, and you do not have independent people that have the, right to kind of audit them, if you will, and their behavior and everything else. This is the danger with the situation when the state becomes all powerful, as it is in Scandinavia and Finland. This is one of the main problems, that you have a group of people involved in something which, they might want to be there, and they're there to protect each other. It's very dangerous,
Yeah. But anyway, I had an idea that, if you add it up, if the Finnish government would help me to determine, with an accurate study, exactly how much it has cost the Finnish taxpayer for the special care of the special care of my children over these last 10 plus years.
Yeah.
Now, not the normal care, not like, when the normal schools or, normal government expenditure for the average child, but the special treatment that my children have received.
Right.
If like for example, the children's homes, the drugs, the police, the ambulance, the fire brigade, the social workers, the cooks, the cleaners, the interpreters, and on and on.
Yeah.
And if they could do an accurate study of the total cost, my guess is it would be 10 times more than it would cost me to maintain an average home in Finland for my children and I. And I believe, I don't believe they ever will do such a study or help me, getting information out of these Finnish government people is like pulling teeth. But, if I could get that information, I think it would be, and particularly if it was a government report, I think it would really knock the Finnish government for a six. Particularly if I could get that on the national media, I think it would be a national outrage.
Yeah. Well, you'd hope so. I'd hope so as well.
Yeah.
But you're right. It's the same situation in Sweden, Warren. It's the same there. And well, you heard we sent you that program as well with Kristi Johansson and his child Dominic. They're trying to get out from Sweden, and to this day, as we're doing this recording, they've yet to resolve the situation and get their child back, basically. And it's the same type of bureaucracy and governmental, they're being gated out, basically. They receive no answers, no anything. It's unbelievable. It's the same situation here.
Yeah. So I had no trouble believing that story at all, of course, but that just reminded me, in 2004, I was I had a meeting with these social workers and psychiatrists, and my ex-wife was there, and they had a lawyer there with them as well, and they had, I don't know who else was there. Maybe they even had a member of the secret police. I mean, I don't think I was that important at that stage. I don't think I'm still that important. But anyway, because, I haven't been able to get much attention, and this is what's fantastic about this Red Ice Radio interview. But so anyway, I had this meeting, and there was at least 10 of them. And my lawyer, Tero, was there with me, and I said to them, listen, this was in 2004, and remember the drugging of William began in 2006. And I said, listen, if all of you people were willing to go to a Finnish court and tell the judge to give William back to me, I said we could go back to Australia and he would be well cared for, because my mother, my mother loved him very much, and William loved her very much. He was a form of protection from his mother. My mother was a form of protection from William's mother, Kaisu.
Mm.
And she doted on him. She was very kind to him. And anyway, so we could have lived with her, and she would have taken wonderful care of him, and there wouldn't have been any drugs. And and I said, listen, we can give William a nice life in Australia. All you people have to do is go to the Finnish court and tell the Finnish judge to give William to me. And I said, if you do that, it will probably happen. If you do not do that, it will probably not happen. And, not one of them said one word.
Wow, so nothing.
No, and I repeated my request, and still nothing. Stone cold silence.
Yeah.
And so anyway, 2009, I'm in Finland, Mikael's birthday party in July 2009 at the children's home. and Kaisu was there. It was the last time I ever saw her, and in 2011 I arrived in Finland. I got a Finnish SIM card, and I whacked it in my phone. And one of the good things about Finland, there are some good things. In Finland, you don't have to prove your identity to get a SIM card. It's a little bit of freedom that Finland's got that we don't have. Anyway, so there's always something better about another country,
Yeah, it's not all bad. It's distributed across the board, and there's some good things with some countries and some bad things. I got you. Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, I rang Kaisu, and Kaisu said, "Kaisu puheli missä?" Kaisu is on the phone. And I said, "Hello, Kaisu." And she hung up on me. Yeah, so that was it.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I'm at this birthday party, and there was these. I gave Mikhail this pig, and it was a dog toy. But when you squeaked, it squashed it, grunted, and he had a fun time with it. And anyway, that was the best toy he got that day. By the way, he was running around whacking everyone with it and would grunt, and every time you hit it in a different way, it would make a different noise. It was a great toy. But anyway, so there were these two people there and these people are very interesting. They're called Auntie and Paula. In English, we say Paula. And anyway, so they are two lawyers, and they're maybe 40 years old, and they, I don't know if they're married or not, but they don't have any children of their own. And I'd found out in 2009 that they were acting as part-time foster parents for Mikhail, and they'd been taking him to their home for weekend visits. Which is very interesting considering the fact that I've not been allowed to spend one moment alone with Mikhail in the entire 11 years of his life.
Yeah. Yeah.
So anyway, so Auntie and Paula, sometime after I left Finland in 2009 or 2010, they got permanent custody of Mikhail without a court order. And so sometimes they said these social workers and psychiatrists, they send me letters and they're saying, we intend to do this and here's your opportunity to respond. But I respond with lawyers sometimes, but it makes absolutely no difference at all. And, on the subject of lawyers, if I could, I don't know if I already said this, but if I had more money, I do believe I could find a good human rights lawyer, but no luck, because I don't have enough money. But anyway,
let me ask you this at this stage. I hope it's not cutting it in too quick here, but does your wife, or your former wife, have money for an attorney, or is it all the government on this end or on the Finnish end that are paying for all of this, and they are now the sole caretakers of your children? Do you know what your role, if you will, of your wife is at this stage, and if she has hired people to help her with the case?
I believe she technically still holds the children's passports, and she's technically their keeper because there's been no legal decision in a court that Mikhail has to go to these foster parents.
Yeah.
And I believe that the Finnish state is willing to throw the entire might of the Finnish state at me to prevent any gain whatsoever in a Finnish court of law.
And why is that, do you think?
Because I've been trying to put these, for one reason, I've been trying to put these psychiatrists in jail. And so, because I believe they're kidnapping my son and they're poisoning him to death with drugs. And last time when I was there in 2011, William had black rings around his eyes, and he was mentally dull, and he was lacking in energy.
Just the way they want him, huh?
Yeah, and I believe that if they do not soon stop this drugging, he's going to suffer organ damage, And interestingly, they accuse him. They sent him to a place in a place called Turku in 2011, and for special treatment. It was about I don't know, 5 kilometers outside of Turku, which is the second biggest city in Finland. And I went there. It was a place called Lausti. And it looked quite nice from the outside. They had an old tractor in the yard and some low-set buildings and some nice gardens and things. But they accused William of attempted suicide. I don't know about attempted suicide, but self-harm and extreme restlessness and extreme aggression. And interestingly, I've been looking on the websites of the manufacturers of these drugs, and they mention restlessness and aggression and suicidal behavior.
Yeah. Yeah, no surprise.
Yeah. So I went to this Lausti place, and I was only allowed to phone. That was in June 2011. I was only allowed to phone William once in June 2011, and I was allowed to visit him once in 2011 for 1 hour.
Wow.
Yeah. And anyway, after that, William came back to Turleton Children's Home. And by this stage, Mikhail had been put in and they wouldn't, in this Lausti place, they wouldn't let me give William a packet of organic raisins, and they wouldn't let me give him any money.
Yeah.
And so I, back to Turleton, sometime in 2009 or 2010, William was back there 2011, William was back there in July. And then I was allowed to see my children twice a week for 1.5 hours at a time, but only at the headquarters of Pelastikar Lapset this time. And so every time I saw Mikhail, this auntie and Paula would bring him, and then the children's home would bring William, because by this stage, as I said, Mikhail was living with Auntie and Paula. And so now on the subject of Auntie and Paula, it's very interesting because it's a clever smokescreen, because if two lawyers are witnessing how my children are being treated and they have no desire to complain, then this backs up the Finnish government's argument that they're being well cared for. All right?
Yeah.
Yeah, but on the other hand, if Auntie and Paula do anything to help me improve my parental rights, they risk losing Mikhail to me.
Yeah.
Yeah, and if they do anything to help me improve my parental rights, they risk having the social workers and the psychiatrists take Mikhail away from them and give him to somebody else.
Yeah, that's right.
So basically, these people are either terrorized or brainwashed by these psychiatrists. I don't know which.
It could also be then that if they do anything to upset the order, if you will, here, then they might not they might not work with them in the future. Meaning, if they are interested in having a foster child, pretty much, then they might be out of that game. So they're playing ball no matter what, right? That they're just trying to be good, behave in a good way according to what they want, what the state wants. Yeah.
Yes, but perhaps it's the best thing that could have possibly happened to Mikhail under the circumstances, because they do seem to take good care of him, and they do have plenty of money, and they have a nice apartment and a nice car and a snowmobile and a boat and all these things, and he gets to take trips around Europe, and he's playing sport, and he seems to be very happy. So I have hope for Mikhail, and so. This Jukka Murtainen from Turleton, he told me that they only drugged 4 out of 7 of the children. So perhaps it was my complaints, my full warning to the police. I don't know if maybe that did some good. They figured, well, we can't drug both these children; it'll be too obvious. But they certainly can only drug 4 out of 7 in the children in the foster home because it would be too obvious. But anyway, I have hope for Mikhail, and so.
Well, let me ask you, why do you think that they want to drug them? Is this experimentation? Are they experimenting with the drugs itself? What do you think is going on there?
I have no doubt that that's going on, but also these drugs do seem to be, if you look at the list of side effects, they do seem to be designed to cause the maximum damage. And I believe if this drugging does not soon stop, that William will have physical damage so severe that he will need drugs to alleviate the symptoms of that physical damage.
Yeah.
You know,
Mm-hmm.
so because they'd been giving him 5 drugs at the same time, you know, and so anyway, I believe what's going on is basically the drug companies, the government medical people, and certain children's charities like Plastica, Lapset, they're making a lot of money out of this, and they're perfectly happy the way things are. And I think that's basically what it is. But I don't know if I quite said this, but I believe that if my children were given to a family member, that would be a stepping stone to getting my children back. And I think they also find it harder to control family members than foster parents, and that's another reason why they won't give the children to them.
Yeah.
So I think that's what's going on there.
What has happened here then with William, considering that he's an Australian citizen? Is it enough by their that your wife is Finnish, and so therefore her children is automatically Finnish citizens as well? So are they dual citizens, or do you know what actually goes on here legally under the surface?
They do have dual citizenship, but when I returned to Australia in 2003, the Attorney General's Department, a woman called Helen Tooth, they said she was the most experienced person with the Hague Convention in Australia, and she said that because I had visited Finland, I had acquiesced and I had forfeited my right to a Hague application.
Why is that?
I don't know.
Just because you visited Finland? Now you...
Yeah.
Okay.
I went there and I said, please come home. And she said no. And I said, please let me take Liam home. And she said no. And anyway, so what else happened? The 2012, 2013, the book finally went on the internet, and these social workers were not impressed with this, and they told me, I think I started saying this, but I don't know if I finished it before, once they saw that there was pictures of my children in this book, my friends who deliver my children's mail are no longer allowed to take photographs of them. And I've decided that if they're going to poison my son to death, then I'm gonna put it in pictures, because maybe one day they will pay for this, you know, and maybe that will help. Again, it's all about, you know, I don't want to punish anyone. I just want it to stop, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, if I could wave a magic wand, I would simply say, as far as these social workers and psychiatrists are concerned, I would, if a Finnish judge was to say to me, well, what would you like to do with these people? I would say, well, look, I would suggest that all of their assets be surrendered to me, and then I would use that money I would find the most effective human rights organization in the world, and I would give most of the money to them, and I would say, you know, go get them.
Yeah.
You know, go get that psychiatry thing, you know. And then I would say, you know, and I would also say that these people are no longer allowed to work in the health or welfare system for the rest of their life, because I do not believe in chopping off their heads or putting them in jail, because putting people in jail tends to make people worse. But then I would say, well, you know, if they reoffended, I would say, ideally, in an ideal world, with my magic wand, I would say I would rent an island off the Russians in the Arctic Ocean, and I would put these people there, and I would say I would make sure they were taken well care of, but I would say you're never getting off this island for the rest of your life.
That's how you feel at this stage.
Yeah. You know.
Yeah. Well, I don't blame you.
Yeah.
Do you know if your wife, again, if we go back to that, because that seems to be a big issue here in terms of what has happened and why it has happened the way it did. Has your wife in any way been declared, I don't know if this is the right word for it here, but basically unfit by the Finnish government to take care of your and her children? I mean, surely if this is the case, then they should have, she should have to justify this to the state in some way, that they should have questioned why now they need to take care of the children as opposed to her, correct?
Well, basically, it seems at least the main reason for Mikhail being dumped on the state was Kaisu's claim that she was unable to cope with the caring of him. It was too hard for her. And so...
I'm questioning as well, on top of it, you've been mentioning about what this costs as well for the state and for the taxpayers and everything else, and that I'm back in that kind of mindset again, that the tremendous costs here, and she would have to justify this to the government in some way, I would think, right?
Well, I really don't know how to explain that, but you see, when I went to the social worker office in a place called Miramarki, and the Finns, they roll the R, they go, "Rrr," but I can't do that, so I just say Miramarki,
Yeah.
But anyway, it was a 4-story building, and now in the city of Vanta, which is similar to the Pine River Shire where I live, at least similar in population, they have a 4-story building, and in Pine River Shire we have a single-story building, and when I went back there in 2007, they had a 7-story building.
It keeps growing.
Yeah. So and anyway, so interestingly, the claim that, particularly with William, that he has to live in this government home for his entire childhood, from the age of 3 till the age of 14 now, is that he has extreme behaviour problems, and so but the curious part is that by their own admission, because over the years I've collected a large pile of documents from these people, perhaps only a fraction of what I wanted. Like, for example, the manager of this children's home, Turleton Seppo Kuunanen, he told me there were 500 recorded incidents of violence involving William.
Okay.
Right? Mm. Now, I said to him, I want a copy of all that information, and I have repeated that request over and over, but nothing. And when I met these social workers in 2011, if not before, I said, I want a copy of every document that you have on my children, and I have a legal right to have those documents. I want them. And I've been saying that for years, and I just get scraps of information occasionally. But the interesting part is that, so Kaisu's unable to cope. William has extreme behaviour problems. He has to live in this government home. Now, by their own admission, these documents that I possess, his behaviour problems continually get worse. And I told them, the more you drug him, the worse he will get. And
sure.
Of course, I told the Finnish police this as well. But as I said, nobody cares.
They don't know anything. They're completely locked into the scientific dictatorship and whatever the medical industry is telling them that's the way to go. So, I mean, in their eyes, I believe as well, on top of this, Warren, they don't think that they're doing anything wrong. They're following protocol and procedure and doing everything that they're allowed to do, right? And doing everything they can. But in the process, as you see it, as the parent, you don't want them to have this treatment, and it's wrong,
Yeah. Well, you see... Things just keep getting worse for William. In 2000, I think it was mid-2012, they've shifted him to a place called Ilmaria, which is many hundreds of miles north of Helsinki, and it's run by an organisation called Mediverko, and they are a medical organisation that gets government contracts. And I don't know too much about them, but they seem to have a wide range of medical services, like dental care and health care, and holding children prisoner hundreds of miles north of Helsinki and drugging them. But now, so this place, the more they drug him, the more money they make.
Yeah.
And so I believe that there's little hope left for William. I believe he'll soon be permanently damaged or dead. And so...
I'm amazed that the Australian government can't do more, won't do more here, at least than when it comes to William, who's an Australian citizen. What do they say? Have you been trying more, except this Hague application, that you talked about earlier? Is there nothing else they can do to initiate conversation with the Finnish authorities and the state?
I went to the Australian Embassy in Stockholm in 2009, or was it 2011? So much to remember. But
yeah.
Anyway, I met two young people there, and one of them was from Finland, and the other one was from Sweden, and they were working for the Australian Embassy, and they made one phone call to I think there was 2007. Anyway, sorry, but look, they made one phone call to this children's home, and that was it.
And there's no paperwork that you could request, or it start a process to try to petition to get William back into your custody?
Well, I met an Australian barrister in 2008.
Yeah.
You familiar with a barrister?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. And anyway, he promised much, but sadly, nothing came of it. And so my view, and I went to the Australian consulate in Helsinki, and in 2003. And when I approached them again, I think it was 2009, they wouldn't even let me in the building.
Well, yeah. you have to set up time with them ahead of time, though, right? You have to make appointments or something. Or is there nothing locally where you're at now that where you can work with it? You know, from your level where you're at now, or you're inside your country? That's what I mean.
Well, possibly I could. I must have tried at least a dozen times to different people in the Australian government, but nothing ever came of it. But
it's unbelievable, you know, that they won't help you with this.
Yeah, but you know, I've put 100 times more attention on the Finnish government than the Australian government, because I have, for experience, it seems to me that the Finnish government doesn't care, and the Australian government cares even less.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So I know there are good people in the Finnish government, and I know that if they just understood everything that I just told you as being true, I think, and if many people in Finland knew that what I've just told you is true, I would be hoping that there'd be one brave soul in the Finnish government that would step forward and help. You know,
I know.
There was a social worker one time. I can't remember her name. I probably got it lost in my filing cabinet somewhere or my emails somewhere. But she mentioned to a psychiatrist, this was in 2007, that she thought the drugging of William should stop.
Mm-hmm.
And she just mentioned it to her verbally, and that was as far as she was willing to go. And I once met a woman, a secretary in the Vanta police station, and she seemed to believe my story, and the interpreter seemed to believe my story. But you know, perhaps it's unlikely if I had pressured them further if they would have stepped forward to help in any way. But anyway, I should have.
Yeah, let me ask you this, Warren, as well, because I think that there might be, at this stage, as you've kind of clarified and alluded to a little bit, that there is something else going on at this stage, but it possibly could be because you have basically voiced concern, maybe in a way also in a manner that they are not used to, shall we say, that you have, and not that you've done anything wrong. Of course not. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that from their point of view, where the state is God and you submit, there's no questioning whatsoever going on in terms of their behavior and everything else, right? So when you've showed an attitude of basically beginning to question them, you know, when you begin to demand documentation for certain things, what's going on, give me and share information, the more you've been doing this, the more reluctant they become, you know, in the relationship towards you, and said, "Oh, we need to hold this guy back." Basically, that's what I think has happened partially as well. Would you agree with that?
There's no doubt that I've made the mistake of trying to explain to these social workers and psychiatrists what they're doing wrong, and how we could be friends if they could help me stop the drugging of William and help me getting back to Australia.
Yeah.
But I've lost patience with them at times and got angry with them and said, although I haven't said anything they didn't deserve, or I didn't think was true. I didn't become threatening or extremely abusive or anything. But
well,
anyway,
if they expect any other reaction, considering the scenario, they're brain dead. They're completely fucking emotionally dead at this stage. Sorry, but seriously, I mean, they have to put themselves in the same situation. And if their children were taken away from them in the same way, held by someone in a foreign country, and they were subjected to medication and things like that haven't been approved by them, or they even know what's going on, how do you think they would react?
Yeah, well, if I for one thing, I learned many years ago that if I had a lot of money, I would have hired a team of human rights lawyers, and I would have kept my mouth shut.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they would have, as you said, been very diplomatic and bowing down and, all the right protocols.
Yeah, you have to run through the, jump through the hoops in just this way, and then you can, exactly. I know.
Yeah. But you see, if I was to talk to these social workers again, I think it would be a clever thing for me to say, how would you like it if your mother took you to the other side of the world and then refused to let you return to your home and see your father for over a decade, and then if your mother was to dump you on the state, and then the state was to drug you without any scientific proof of illness, and I've been demanding this since 2003, and no proof has come because none exists, and so there are all these vague definitions. They have this thing called the DSM, the Psychiatric Bible, and there is not one form of human behavior that could not be categorized as a mental illness if you look at that book.
Yeah, exactly. Well, this is what I'm talking about when it comes to the scientific dictatorship, that any kind of behavior now could be considered to be an illness, a psychological issue and problem, and it needs to be dealt with a chemical application,
So this new children's home, Ilmaria, in the old children's home, when I rang the place, they would normally answer the phone, and sometimes I would get the chance to talk to William. Now, in this new children's home, they almost never answer my phone calls, and when they do, they normally hang up on me, right?
Yeah.
And so this is not a good sign. And so I have only been able to speak to William. William phoned me sometime this year because he wanted a toy, and it was a computer game. And I got it for him, and it was quite difficult. But I was concerned that he wouldn't get it. So I contacted a church in this place, Surnainen, or Sainainen, I don't know how you, that A with the dots on top.
Yep.
Anyway, they approached the children's home, and I asked them, could you please contact William and tell him that I love him and deliver his mail. And they approached the children's home, and the children's home said no. And so the only friends I have in Finland are in southern Finland, and they can't drive hundreds of miles to deliver a mail package. So I risked it, and I mailed it to him, and he got it, and he was very happy with that. So
your relationship is still, he knows about you, hasn't forgotten about you, everything is okay there, right, William?
Well, sadly, when I was in Finland in 2009, both of my children hopped in the car with me the day I was leaving, and they wanted to come back to Australia with me. And William had been begging to come back to Australia for years. Mm-hmm. And that reminds me, in 2009, I taught William that because I was allowed to talk to him in his bedroom privately, and I warned him that these drugs were bad, and he was throwing them down the toilet. And he said, I feel better. And he said that Anu Kusi, this psychiatrist, she's been more responsible for the drugging of William than anybody. And William said to me, Anu Kusi is a shithead. Right? Yeah. So in 2009...
It's the judgment of the child, the patient here, folks. So keep that in mind. Yeah? Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. So he was completely on my side. Both of my children were completely on my side. As a matter of fact, another amusing thing happened in 2009. Mikhail was fighting with another child, and he was put in his bedroom as a punishment. And so he had scratches on his face. And anyway, I thought, well, I'm going to teach this little tiger how to throw a punch. So I did. And then the next week, I think it was, the manager of the children's home, Seppo Kuunanen, he walked up to him and punched him fair in the stomach.
Jeez.
And
well, that's not going to help his case, though, right? He needs to, he needs to say, to give the veneer of being, calm or appreciative of the situation despite feeling otherwise, I guess, and try to seriously, I don't know what would help in this case. Well, I mean, you kind of alluded to it earlier, Warren, but what would unlock the situation? What would be the key to making to have the children come back into your care? What would that be? Go over that again for us.
I believe that if most of the Finnish people could hear this interview, and if even a small fraction of them were to believe it to be true, I would hope that there would be a large number of Finnish people that would howl with protest at the Finnish government, and something would be done. And at least perhaps a small number of very determined people would step forward and push the cause. And I think that if even 10% of the Finnish people were to hear and believe this story, I don't think the Finnish government could stand the international embarrassment, And I think that William would come back to me. And curiously, the justification for holding William prisoner and continuing to drug him is behaviour problems, and by their own admission, those behaviour problems continue to get worse. Then by the logic that William had behaviour problems that his mother Kaisu couldn't cope with, then by that same logic, if those behaviour problems became worse in the care of the psychiatrists, then the logic dictates he should go into the care of a family member or back to his father. Back to his father, ideally, second choice family member, third choice foster parent.
Who would that family member be, though, if you could choose? I guess.
Well, it would be Kaisu's sister and her man.
Yeah.
And
are you still in contact with them? Is that okay?
Yeah.
Everything okay there between you guys? And so.
Yeah. I visited them last time I was in Finland, and I don't. I've never pressured them to help in any way. I don't think Kaiser would listen to them, and I don't really have any contact with any of the other family members. I mean, I could find them. I could find them on Facebook, but I think that would perhaps be impolite. But
well, considering the scenario you're in here, you're desperate for help for anybody who could, help you out and help William out at the end of it, right?
Well, of course, I'd welcome their help, but I don't know if that's perhaps the right move on the chessboard.
Right. Yeah. No, I see what you mean exactly. At this stage, it's a tactical game, and you need to do everything. Right to get your children back. So, what's going on next here, though? Where's your strategy then? Because this is what it is. It's a strategy to get your children back. What are you looking at doing next here?
Well, I'm hoping that this great opportunity to talk to you will cause more people to look at my book, and then it's just a matter of if you've got cockroaches in your kitchen and you put a spotlight on them, they scatter.
Yeah,
and I think the media could put the spotlight on the psychiatrists, and that's the purpose of that. But I would like, if I may, to read some bits and pieces from some of these statements that I have from these people. Would that be okay?
Yeah, sure. I always wanted to mention before you do that, though, as well.
Yeah.
Media subsidies, state subsidies, basically, for the media is very, very common in the Nordic countries, and I believe Finland is incorporated into that particular model, if you will, as well. I'm trying to find some information about that as we speak here, but that's another problem.
Correct.
That's a huge problem, Warren, in terms of why they would pick this story up. Yeah, go ahead.
That's perfectly correct. I met a man called Marty Virtanen, who had his own current affairs show. I met him in Finland, I think it was in 2007, and he told me that he liked the story, but he was afraid of getting sued by the medical industry.
Yeah.
I'll read the story from this. There was a man, I found a man in, you might find this of interest, I found a man in 2011. His name was Baron Christopher Bernadotte von Aschberg, and he claimed to be a member of a Swedish royal family.
Yeah, Bernadotte. Yeah, I know that name. Yeah.
Okay. And he sent me. We were communicating via email, and this was his first email. Dear Warren, I have no words at this moment after looking and listening to your heartbroken story. It is such a waste and shame that you cannot get help from the Finnish authorities, that your solicitors do not stand firm to get your case heard in a court of justice for human rights. With the information regarding the medication, you have a strong case, and also your case have valuable information on how instructions are run. These can be a assist to the courts of human rights. Please forward me with more detail regarding your case and the human rights group in Finland. I wish to help you and your children. I am the founder of the Irish Foundation because he's living in Ireland. I'm the founder of the Irish Foundation for Tortured Survivors and the recipient of the 2001 St. Angela's International Peace and Justice Award and the 2003 Lord Mayor of Dublin Award. I am fully qualified medical consultant and also qualified in criminal and human rights law. Please send me what you can, as it will be treated as confidential and private. I will try to help you. And this sounded wonderful, but nothing ever came of it. The communication just faded away. And I don't know if he really was who he claimed to be,
right.
Or if he simply found something more important to do, or if he was intimidated in some way. But anyway, that came to nothing, which was very sad. But
well, hopefully you can hear from him again if he indeed has any influence in terms of helping you out there. But yeah.
All right. And there's a statement here from 2004 from a nosy but kind-hearted neighbour in Australia, and this says it better than I can say it, I think. And so it's one page, and would it be okay to read that?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Okay, all right. To whom it may concern, my name is Jennifer Ann Hendra, and I reside at the above address. I have lived at that address for the past 20 years. I am 64 years of age, a mother and a grandmother. I have no criminal record. My property borders Max and Warren McLachlan's property on one corner. Up until 2002, I have had an unimpeded view into their back garden. I now have a small garden shed in the corner, but I can still see into their garden. During the latter part of 1999, 2000, and until October 2001, I was concerned for the welfare of William McLachlan, the infant son of Warren and Kaiser McLachlan. In my opinion, the mother of the infant, William, was guilty of physical, verbal, and mental abuse against her son. I was concerned enough to report the matter to the Child Welfare Authority, but refrained from doing so until I had spoken with the child's grandmother, Warren McLachlan, and told her of my fears. So Kaiser McLachlan, I'm just skipping forward here. Kaiser McLachlan often slapped the young William. She continually screamed abuse at him in a very loud voice. She told him how naughty he was, how stupid he was, what an awful child he was. I have also seen her pinch the little one on both his arms and his legs. One of her favourite punishments was to take away his toys and not allow him to play in his paddling pool. She would also not allow him to pet the dog, of which he was very fond. William was a normal baby and toddler. He did not cry continually, and whenever I saw him, he was not a difficult child. I think that's enough of that. Amazing statement here from a psychiatrist in 2004 by the name of Marja Alvinen. In our view, the problems, this is just one sentence, in our view, the problems that William and the family have are so serious that William needs long-term therapy and the family intensive support. The best way of achieving this would be hospitalisation. The authority exerted by and the means available to outpatient care to impose the restrictions required for the father are insufficient.
Clarify that last part for us again. What does that mean? What does that mean to you, Warren?
It's a translation. That's the problem.
Yeah.
It says the authority exerted by and the means available to outpatient care to impose the restrictions required for the father are insufficient. And what that means to me is that they don't want me to know what they're doing to him.
And they want to restrict you from having any influence in this case as well.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Do the state always, and this is another issue, of course, but do the state always side with the mother as well? I mean, in this case, okay, then I can understand. It's in Finland. You're from Australia. There's question mark. Here, who should they trust? Who could they talk to legally? Blah blah blah. Everything. But we've heard so many cases from so many fathers that basically are hung out to dry, and they're left not being able to see their children because the state and the lawyer and the system and everything sides with the mother, right?
I think the basic point is that the state is running a divide and conquer tactic. They want to bust up families because, again, of the profit motive that's involved, for one reason at least.
Yeah.
At least these drug companies and these medical people and these so-called children's charities, they want to bust up families to increase their income. And women tend to be more inclined to seek help from the state than men. And so, and on top of that, the woman gives birth, the woman breastfeeds, and so there's a natural bond there, and it's hard to argue in a court of law that the child should be with the father as opposed to the mother.
Mm-hmm.
And so normally, if the mother isn't an ogre, the child goes to the mother, and so this sort of sets a legal precedent.
Yeah. And
that the women are being conditioned into, seeking help from the state, like going for immunisations and going to social workers, etc. But men tend to be want to be self-sufficient, and so I think that if you're going to bust up a family, you've got to target the man because that's easier.
Yeah.
I think that's what's going on here.
Yeah, I believe you're right. I think because, and ultimately as well, I think that many people on the level of what we're talking about now might not have this perception in mind or even this attitude in mind, but I think through the way that the government has been run in the last, 30, 40 years, maybe even more, this strategy has been incorporated into the model itself because it makes people more dependent on the state and the government, and that's ultimately where they see the key is lying, because if people were capable and independent of running their lives outside of the government, then the need for them would slowly diminish. But now we're seeing a reverse and opposite of that. We're seeing more and more there's more and more incentive for the government to be in place just because of these situations, because of families are shattered, kids need to be schooled by the state, etc. There's a number of, variables here that basically that the government and the state relies on to perpetuate itself and be in existence. And it's just getting worse and worse on that end, isn't it? Yeah.
Well, I think that one of the drivers for this, one of the big drivers, is you've literally got multinational drug companies that have a bigger annual income than the Finnish government,
Yeah.
And they would probably, it would be great to get the exact bones of this, so much more could be put into my book, but I would like to know, what donations do these drug companies donate hospital wings? Do they pay these Finnish psychiatrists to promote their drugs? Do they give them consultancy positions and pay them large sums of money and so on?
Yeah.
And so I think that's what's going on. But I think that's a big driver in it. You've simply got multinational corporations, in some cases that have been around for centuries, that are literally running rings around politicians.
Yeah.
I
know. And they're using the system to perpetuate, their own company and their financial interests. Yeah. They're
using the government to shut down their competition and expand their monopoly.
Yeah, exactly.
But anyway, so
and just interject this as well. Obviously, they don't have. There might be another motive behind this as well, or for example, why the choice of drugs, etc. I mean, I can go far and wide in my conspiracy theories in terms of what they want to do, but ultimately, it's not health that they have in mind. It's to keep people again dependent on a drug to keep them coming back for getting that pill more and more, so that this becomes something part of everyday life for every human on the planet. This would give them, the drug companies, more money than they ever could dream of, if they could become part of everyone's reality and have to pop pills every day, basically.
Well, yeah, I mean, like an interesting point on that is that if you have an expanding welfare class, they will vote the working class. They will vote to tax the working class out of existence.
Yep,
and this is and this is the danger of democracy. Two wolves and a sheep deciding what's for dinner.
That's right. Yep.
So I think perhaps the ideal form of government would be no government at all.
That's right. That's right.
But that would be a situation where you didn't need a lock on your door. Nobody ever killed anybody. Nobody ever stole anything off anybody. Nobody ever lied to anybody.
Well, the fact is that these things occur anyway with this, with these securities and things in place. People still break that law even if the law is there. So that's obviously not what it's about. It's about a mental state of human beings and our own welfare and our own capability of taking care of ourselves. So there's so many things lacking here.
Yeah. Well, I think the state basically, certainly partly driven by these monopolistic, international organizations, want to make everybody totally dependent on the state, and they want a monopoly on production and distribution.
Yeah.
And I think, and this is one of the drivers, but the state wants to expand their power base and thereby expand their income. And politicians also, they do a thing called insider trading. That's another one of their big games. They get information before other people get it, and they act on it, and they make millions of dollars out of it.
Sure. Oh, yeah, absolutely. I just wanted to interject here as well then, Warren, before we carry on here. From a story in 2011, World Association of Newspapers and News Publishers, this story came out that detailed a little bit about media state subsidies, and it says the following regarding Finland. Finland gave the most public money per capita to support the media, around 46 pounds, actually, British pounds a year per head, via indirect subsidies such as tax and VAT exemptions. It also goes on to say, well, and also then mind you that despite this, after this, the Finnish people also have to go on, they pay for the newspaper, you have TV license things on top of this, and in 2013, Finland actually replaced the television license with a direct unconditional income tax called Yle-vero, which is 50 to 140 euros, I guess, per household, I guess, depending on income, or per person. I don't know. The proceeds are used for funding the public broadcaster Yle's radio. So, I mean, that's a scenario you're looking at as well on top of this, that you have, a media that are getting the main thrust of their funding from the government itself. Why would they turn around and bite that hand that feeds them,
Yeah, well, that's interesting, But that reminds me that statement I was trying to find for you. There was a man, I think his name was Ari Korvola, who was also working for YLE. And I remember he said, "I am so sorry what you suffered, and this should be a civilized country." But again, he would do nothing. But I would like to read from this Mariana Tillman, who was the manager of this children's home that William was staying in 2007. Would that be okay?
Sure, no worries. Go ahead. Yeah.
Okay. All right, so it says, Mr. Warren McLachlan, father of William, during our phone conversation on April 19, 2007, you asked me to reply in writing to your request that the people mentioned below are entitled to meet with your son, William McLachlan, a human rights organization of your choice, a lawyer of your choice, a doctor of your choice, a private detective of your choice, and a representative of a religious organization of your choice. And it says here, she says, it is not in the best interests of William to meet with people totally unknown to him. Well, I could counter that by saying, well, it's not in the best interests of William to meet you because you're totally unknown to him,
exactly.
and I don't trust you. I don't trust you.
And who are these foster parents and everything? I mean, if they're people unknown, then you are the best person to meet, to care for him. What the hell is that? Ridiculous.
Yeah, and wouldn't I be the best person to judge who would be the best people to meet with my son?
Well, of course, because you're the father. Yeah.
Yeah. And if I may read briefly from this website called drugs.com on the subject of Zyprexa, which is one of the drugs they gave William. And remember, they've been giving him up to at least 5 drugs at a time, maybe more now, I just don't know. But the side effects go like this. Severe allergic reactions, rash, hives, itching, difficulty breathing, tightness in the chest, swelling of the mouth, face, lips or tongue, unusual hoarseness, abnormal thoughts, chest pain, confusion, decreased urination, fainting, fast, slow or irregular heartbeat, fever, chills or persistent sore throat, increased saliva production or drooling, increased sweating, memory loss, menstrual changes, muscle pain, weakness, stiffness, worsening mental or mood changes, e.g. depressions, hallucination, one-sided weakness, seizures, severe or prolonged dizziness or headache, a shortness of breath, suicidal thoughts or actions, swelling of the hands, legs or feet, symptoms of high blood sugar, increased thirst, hunger or urination, unusual weakness, symptoms of high prolactin levels, e.g. enlarged breast size, decreased sexual ability, missed menstrual period, nipple discharge, tremor, trouble concentrating, speaking or swallowing, trouble sitting still, trouble walking or standing, uncontrolled muscle movements, e.g. arm, leg or leg movements, twitching of the face or tongue, jerking or twisting, unusual bruising, vision changes, yellowing of the skin or eyes. This is not a complete list of all side effects that may occur.
Well, it's not so bad then. Yeah, that's all right.
And that's only one of the drugs they've been giving him. And bear in mind,
how this happened, Warren. I mean, any of this happened is it's a nightmare. How this got approved and how people are okay with this, considering what they legally have to put on their freaking pills that they're trying to give to people. It's unbelievable.
You know what I believe? I believe that most people they're hoping that if they do what the government tells them to, they'll be left alone, and they're afraid of the government, and they don't really want to know what they suspect that perhaps some things are not as they should be, but they really don't. Most people, apparently, to me, don't really want to know what bad things the government are up to, because most people, being good people, if they knew that the government was doing some really bad things, they would have to rebel against the government in some way. And most people are very comfortable with their life exactly the way it is, no matter how bad and unbearable it may seem to them.
That's right. Yeah, you're right.
Their fear of change, it terrifies them.
And responsibility, having to do something about something upsetting the order, rocking the apple cart. Yeah, people don't want to do it. They want to live a peaceful life, quiet with their families and just chill out. They don't want this, but the more we stay away from it and try to huddle, in fear of just and scouring away and trying to avoid it, the bigger this beast is going to grow, and eventually there won't be anywhere that you can hide and run from anymore.
But I believe that obeying the government and hoping that they'll leave you alone or protect you is similar to lying down in front of a pack of wolves and saying, well, perhaps if I behave in a non-threatening manner, they'll leave me alone.
Yeah. Unfortunately, that seems to be where it's come to,
Yeah. But anyway, so there's a statement.
Let me just mention this as well. Sorry to interrupt, Warren, again, but and it's also really in a situation like this, which is it's outside of the box, it's outside of the comfort zone. Most people never get to experience this situation that you've been in, but it's when you kind of end up between between you fall through the cracks basically, and something unexpected happens. You don't really understand wait a minute, how's this going to go now? And that's when you're kind of exposed to and experience the ferocious behavior of a bureaucracy like this, who's completely emotionally stunted. They don't have anything in consideration. There's not the one person that you can talk to. It's just a wall of papers that are coming at you, while you, Warren, on this case, is sitting on the other end receiving this. You have an emotional tie to your children. You want to spend time with them. You want to be with them, and all you're getting all you get in response is like nonsensical papers, basically, and you can't get a straight answer from anybody. There's tremendous frustration involved in this.
Yeah, well, that reminds me of one more thing I wanted to say about Auntie and Paola. They have a special telephone just for me, and they only turn it on Wednesday nights between 7:30 and 8:30 p.m. Finnish time. And if I ask them for their normal phone number, they hang up on me.
Yeah, they're not allowed to do it. What was the length of that time again, you said? How much did you get? A half
1
an hour?
hour.
1 hour on Wednesdays?
Wednesday night between 7:30 p.m. and 8:30 p.m. I can phone with Mikhail.
And what time is that for you, by the way?
That's currently what is that? Summertime, it's 2 a.m. and wintertime. Summertime, it's 2 a.m. and wintertime, it's 3 a.m.
Wow. Well, that's considerate also, you know? Yeah.
Yeah, but
you work and, you know, yeah. Anyway.
Yeah. But, so, anyway...
So you can, sorry again to interrupt, but so you can talk to them once every week for an hour, or is it their choice to pick it up if you call them, or how does that work?
Well, Mikhail is happy to talk to me. That reminds me, in 2011, when I was visiting William at this Plastica Lapset headquarters, I wanted to speak to him privately and tell him something, and I pulled him to one side, and William said to me, bearing in mind, in 2009, we were in his bedroom sharing secrets. I was sneaking him vitamins. He was throwing the psych drugs down the toilet. They were begging to come back to Australia with me. It was truly heartbreaking because I knew by the time I got back again, the chances of William being physically damaged or dead would increase. And anyway, so 2011, I pulled William to one side and said, "Hey, William, I want to tell you something." And he said, "I'm not allowed to stand close to you or talk to you privately." And the social worker, Tommy, he came over and he said, "That's right, William is not allowed to speak to you unless I can hear what you are saying." Right? Anyway, I was not impressed with this. And I walked over to Tommy and I stood about an inch away from his face and I looked him right in the eye. And he said, "Move." And I didn't move. And he pushed me and I didn't move. And then he cancelled the meeting.
Yeah.
So anyway, I restrained myself. You can imagine what I would have liked to have done to him.
Yeah. And it's like, how do these people not expect you to be? It's, you know what? I think it's almost like what they're trying to do is like they're trying to provoke you because they want to have that violence come out of you so that they, for good, can take away your children, you know. And so that's the worst thing you could do, obviously, in this case.
That's absolutely what they're about. But I don't think all these people are evil. I think I'm certain that it does attract pedophiles and sadists to the industry, but in the case, you know, I think that some of them do mean well, but I think by doing what they do, they incriminate themselves increasingly, and they become more part of the game. They have to cover up, you know, for the crimes of their fellows and themselves. They become incriminated.
And all your reactions are normal, you know, to have this frustration locked up inside of you and having them the power to do what they've done. I mean, exactly. It's amazing you haven't gone postal on these, you know, assholes. Sorry, but I mean, it's unbelievable that they can do this.
You know why I haven't? Well, one of the reasons I haven't is because they want me to.
Well, exactly. I know.
Right?
Yeah.
That would be the icing on the cake.
Yeah.
Look, we had to lock this bloke up because he's crazy.
Yeah.
Look, his children are crazy. His wife's crazy. Obviously, you know, it runs in the family. Case closed. You know, he will never see the light of day again.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And I'd like to read briefly, if I could, from this psychiatrist, Jill Backstrom. During spring 2011, William has repeatedly tried to harm himself. Medication, Serenel in the mornings, Abilify in the mornings, olanzapine in the mornings, taken when needed, atarax, lorazepam.
Lorazepam.
Additional,
That just knocks you out. These drugs are what takes. This is what takes the humanity out of the children as well, by the way. And that's why, now they're calm. Everything is fine now. I mean, don't they understand? Don't they have a basic... I mean, they're into psychiatry, of course, which is a different field from psychology, which is psychiatry is more modern with the medication and the chemicals and everything. But wouldn't they understand that a child who has been ripped from his parents in this way has an expression of sadness and anger and his world has been shattered? Don't they understand this basic stuff?
Like I say, I believe they become increasingly incriminated, and they end up with mortgages and car payments and pensions and holidays. And these are the good ones, right? The ones that don't like to hurt children. Yeah. And then they have committed by the simple act of obeying orders. If there was a Nuremberg style trial, and if it was more effective than Nuremberg. And I don't know if you're familiar, but during Nuremberg, the American psychiatric industry spared no expense to protect the German psychiatrists, which were the basic cause of the death camps.
Oh, sure. They wanted the information extracted out of those that international experiment called the Second World War that was done. Everything that was done on the medical basis there, absolutely. Of course, there was invested interest by the internationalists to get that information out so they could use that for the population after, on the population after the war.
Yeah, but also if the German psychiatrists had have hung, then the spotlight would have turned on the American psychiatrists.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so anyway, there's one, like I said, they've never given me any scientific proof that William has any illness of any kind. And this is the closest admission that I've ever got from them, that he actually doesn't have anything wrong with him at all. And it says, William is physically a basically healthy boy. So this is from this psychiatrist, Jill Backstrom. So basically they've admitted right there, in layman's terms, that they have no scientific proof that William has any illness of any kind.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Now, the first statement I got from these social workers began in 2002, and I just highlighted a couple of points out of these 5 pages. May I read those?
Sure, yes.
Okay. It says, on 2003, on 14th February, the Social Services Centre received a child welfare notification concerning William. According to the anonymous informant, the mother treated William roughly and even struck him. Right?
Yeah.
Now, 2004, the daycare centre had found that the only way to restrain William was to hold him physically, which could continue for up to 2 hours. Now, that reminds me of another point. And in one of these other documents I've got floating around in my fat filing cabinet, Kaisu dumped William onto the psychiatrist in 2003 in fits and spurts. And at one stage, she came back. Actually, no, it's right here. It's in this paper here. That's right. Where are we? What year is this now? 2004. It says here, when the mother and the boys were in the shelter, the staff noticed that the mother had begun shouting at William at the slightest cause. And that's not what I wanted. It must be on the next page. Here we go. 2005. Damn, why can't I find that? But anyway, 2005, on Wednesday, William began an examination period on Klondike Children's Psychiatric Ward. Anyway, in one of these statements, they say that Kaisu came to bring him home from a weekend for a weekend visit.
Mm-hmm.
And William physically fought her to prevent her from taking him home.
Okay. Well, there's a reason for that, I guess.
Yeah, because in this stage, 2005, they hadn't drugged him in this place.
Yeah.
And I guess they hadn't. I think the thing I'm hoping for is that Finland seems to be more civilized than America. And I know that, for example, children are suffocated to death in psychiatric hospital. Children have been suffocated to death in psychiatric hospitals in America by pinning them to the ground. And I just get the feeling that Finland is more of a velvet-gloved welfare state.
Well, there you go. Yes.
Yeah. They want to kill the child professionally and slowly with velvet gloves.
With a smile on the child's face. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm hoping that this means that he hasn't been raped. I'm certain that he's been beaten, because if they're going to beat him in a kindergarten, what are they going to do in there when he bites them or punches them? But hopefully the children haven't been raped. And I just get the feeling that they would be in much greater danger in America.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because they've got this sort of out-of-control, private, capitalistic psychiatric industry.
Yeah, but in some cases, that's better, though, because they do have a difference. There is, I mean, I have to say, I have to defend that model because, I mean, again, being from Scandinavia and just seeing the monopoly that the government has on anything when it comes to healthcare and offering services. In the case of a private, it doesn't mean that everything is rainbows and perfect there either. It's not that, but the idea there at least is that you can make the judgment for yourself. If you're not comfortable with it being in someone's hand, you can change it. There are different private practices that you can talk with and get a different feel for it. And I just think that would be so much better if they then, in that case, truly had money as an interest. Then that interest would be to take good care of them. See, in a government scenario, you don't have that question. You don't have that variable there. If you see what I'm getting at, Warren, which means that and this is what it's about, that sure, you might have a system that's really beneficial and it's all good and you have benevolent people in there and everything's wonderful. But if you get the wrong people in place in those positions, then they have all the power in the world and you have nothing to say about it. So it's all about that very, very dangerous variable, which is, all right, do we trust our entire system to hang on the balance on a few people and we have to trust that they are good people and can do this right? Or do we divide up the power among many different entities, in this case then private, where, okay, you can run into some rotten eggs here and there, but at least then you have the power and the option to choose something else. Do you see what I mean?
I think that capitalism is a better system, no doubt. However, you've got this sort of, at the moment, I'm guessing that the average child is safer in a Finnish government home than an American government home or an American psychiatric private hospital.
How about an Australian one?
I don't know too much about it, but we did have the curious case in the 70s of a psychiatrist that killed, I think it was about 40 people in CIA mind control experiments.
In Australia?
Oh, yeah.
Huh.
Yeah. And what happened was a human rights group fought for decades, and they got this thing on in the courts. And the day before the man was due to appear in the courts, the head psychiatrist, he committed suicide.
Yeah.
But anyway, so I think that ultimately, yes, when the state gets absolute power, you may see a rerun of something similar to Nazi Germany. But in America, you've sort of got a twisted form of monopoly capitalism.
Sure. Well, exactly. That's the problem.
Yeah, yeah. Where I know there was so it's kind of like ultimately the Finnish state is more communistic and more state run. So it's perhaps going to end up at that very dark place sooner than America.
Well, I think so. And what's dangerous there as well, Warren, and I've talked about this in the context of Sweden, but it's that when you have this, velvet glove on top of that, iron fist, if you will, of that tyranny, then people are more inclined not to believe that these things are going on. In that way, it's more dangerous. When it's more open and overt, people know what they're facing. They know that it is an enemy, if you will. But in this case, people laugh at you if they say that, if you try to come to them and say that there's human right abuses in Sweden, or, that there's violence from the government, or any of these things. And, people who don't know anything about the country but have read about it in a wonderful publication, like The Economist or something, they just laugh in your face and think you're crazy,
Yeah. Well, I know there was an example of a American psychiatric hospital, a private one, that was looking through the computer for people with high class medical insurance, and was sending goons out and kidnapping them, and and locking them up and drugging them until their insurance ran out and kicking them out on the street.
Yeah, I mean, and just to follow up on that as well, I don't know how many stories I've heard about when it comes to elderly care in Sweden, which is, you know, a lot of it is socialized as well, but these intense abuses of the elderly in these wards, you know, and they're being violently beaten, and people have been trying to rob them and stuff like that. It's like it's just a sickness in the human spirit of people who are doing this kind of stuff to the young and to the old, and those who don't have the ability to defend themselves. It's parasitical assholes, and they come in every society, it seems like, unfortunately.
I think what happens, Henrik, in government is that if you have, for example, a thing called democracy, what you have, I believe, you have a minority of people, let's take the magic figure of 1%, that like to hurt other people.
Yeah.
Okay? And so then you have a system called democracy, where you vote for a certain person every 4 years, and then you go back to your fishing boat and your esky full of your box of beer, and everything, and back to work, and life goes back to normal. But in that situation, I would argue that what you have is government by the minority. If you're electing a minority to govern your country and tell you what to do, then you have government by the minority. And my argument is that if you have government by the minority, you will have government for the minority.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and what I've noticed is with politicians is the dumb ones, they're just there for the benefits, like the pension funds, the big paycheck, all of the side benefits, the first class hotels and things like this. But the smart ones, they like, we've got a prime minister now called Kevin Rudd, and his wife. I don't know too much about it because I work a lot, and these trips to Finland, on my average wage, I work hard. I'm good at saving my money, and most of my spare cash has been burnt on these trips to Finland.
Yeah.
And so sadly, I couldn't afford this human rights lawyer. But anyway, so Kevin Rudd's wife. Point being is I'm so busy working, and I've written most of this book on my iPhone, as a matter of fact, in stolen moments at work. So I don't have time to worry. I certainly don't have any interest to worry about the mass media, because I think that I'm less likely to get the truth from there. I'm more likely to get the truth from the alternative media. So I like to listen to radio programs on my iPhone, like, for example, yours.
Cool.
But yeah. But anyway, point being, I have no time or interest for the corporate. I call them the corporate media, and and the Kevin Rudd's wife. I'm just guessing. I don't pay any attention to because I look at the real picture of politics, the hidden hand. That's what interests me. And so when I was a child, I don't know if I said this. Did I say that I was interested in UFOs? And
we talked about that a little bit earlier before we began recording, but you can let us in on that if you want. Yeah, so, this led to me to looking at, I become rather bored with UFOs because it's too damn hard to get any evidence on it, and perhaps life-threatening if there is any real evidence. And anyway, I'm obsessed with this book and working. And so point is, no intention in the corporate, no interest in the corporate media, no time for it. I found that UFOs, it's a very hard, very hidden, hard subject to get at. I've heard enough hearsay about that. I'm rather bored with it. But this story about government corruption, it just keeps growing, and it's like a soap opera, Yeah, it is.
Yeah, and so I like to keep up on that. I find one of the best sources of information is the precious metal experts.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Because they talk about commodities and politics of commodities and money, and that gives you a real window into what's actually going on.
Yeah.
But because these people are like scientific money men, you know what I mean?
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. And anyway, so Kevin Rudd's wife, Kevin Rudd's a smart fella, and his wife, I think, point is, I haven't had time to look at it, but I'm guessing from hearsay, she's made multi-millions of dollars out of government contracts.
Yeah.
Now, if I was a betting man, I would put my right arm on bet my right arm that she obtained those contracts through insider trading, courtesy of her husband.
Yeah, of course.
So this is what the smart ones are doing. Now, they of course form alliances with big companies, and the bigger the better. And I think what's happening is, if I had the time, I'd like to write a book about who donated what to which political party, and what laws were changed that suited that donor.
Mm.
You know?
Yeah.
And so they the smart politicians, I believe, form alliances with big business, and in return, the big business pays for their election campaigns. They give them cushy retirement jobs. They give them insider trading tips. And so maybe even brown paper bags in Swiss bank accounts if they're doing all that.
Yeah.
You know, so you know, the point is, you end up in that situation with increasingly monopolistic international corporations that ultimately, I think, if they're left to their own devices for another, I don't know, 20 or 50 or 100 years, you're going to see a situation worse than Nazi Germany, like worldwide.
Yeah, and the relationship here that they've entered into is the nature of such that all of this is enforced as well by, see, on their own as an individual company. Sure, there is a lot of power that you could amass by that, but ultimately what people need to keep in mind as well, that it's with the access to a government that enables them to enforce whatever new rules and bullshit laws that they put in place with their police and ultimately the military force. And that's where it becomes really dangerous. So it's through this relationship, just as you say, that the really bad things happen. And I think if they were standing on their own, if this enforcement structure of violence with military and police wasn't in place, it wouldn't be so ferocious as it is today. But that's what we're seeing, Warren. We're seeing the expansion of where government in this case is being used to be an extension to this international beast that we see of a few people, basically. And that's where it gets really dangerous, you know?
Yeah, well, Mussolini defined fascism as the merger of state and corporate powers.
Yeah.
So for example, when the American government bailed out the banks for their bad housing loans, the American government increased their debt to those same banks to bail out those banks, which is totally illogical. But however, at the same time, the banks increased the government's debt to them, thereby increasing their control over the government.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's right.
Right? And so this basically will devolve eventually, I believe, if the public doesn't reverse it, into competing crime gangs, where ultimately the most ruthless will rise to the top. And then in this situation, you attract the worst of the worst to the organizations in government that operate in secret.
But there's one thing that would solve this, and that's, one, people speak up against this, and two, they actually make choices where they take themselves outside of the sphere of the influence of whatever they do not agree with ideologically or politically or what have you. And if this is purchasing from a company, that they don't support, then, or don't want to support, then don't do it. You see what I mean? It's all, I see that it's a relationship between the slave and the slave master, where people's, they complain on it, but they then willingly kind of just go along with what's being there for them. There has to be a stage where people say no to it and walk the other way and set up their own infrastructure for how they want to see things being run, basically. And that's what has to be done. Otherwise, as you say, it will go down this really, really dark road, and people will be in a complete position of dependency at that stage, and then there won't be an ability to set something else up, but there still is today. That's where I'm seeing the hope, Warren.
Yeah. As bad as the criticisms, government and big business do deserve a lot of criticism, but I ultimately think that the largest criticism lies with the masses.
Yeah.
Because there's a few of us that have an interest to make the world a better place for our children, and we are aware that governments are becoming increasingly worse, and the rest seem to be rather like an ostrich. Like, it's said that if an ostrich keeps its head in the sand, it thinks that if it can't see you, you can't see it.
Yeah, that's
and
right.
That's the game they're playing, and I think that, for example, if at the next election in my country, which is coming soon, national election, imagine if everybody simply went to the ballot box and put in a blank form.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Now, that would be a revolution without firing a shot.
Yeah.
Because obviously, the politicians have been formally sacked, and then we have to form a new system of government.
Yeah, if any.
Yeah, exactly. And I would say, personally, I believe that you don't want a national government because that leads to a national army, and a national army leads to an international war. So who needs one of those? Right. That's my belief.
Mm-hmm. And
belief number 2, you don't need a state government. You need because that will lead to interstate wars, right?
Yep.
And I think ideally, if I could wave my magic wand again, I would have local governments, and they would be defined as a system of community built up around a port. Now, whether it be a seaport or a rail port or a trucking port or an airport, the point is the incoming freight gets taxed, and only once and at a set rate, and there are no other taxes. And then you have government by the local people for the local people, and obviously eventually you'll end up with these mad tyrants who want to kill everybody, but at least you can only have a local war.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, it's a point in it. It again, it goes back to, if you have a world governmental structure and a system, which so many political philosophers argue that it's the only way to go these days. But they have this naive approach that it will be, not that it is that in this stage, but they still believe that it's in fairly good hands at this stage. But the fact is that if that structure is in place, you can have anyone basically coming in there and taking over. I mean, Star Wars showed it pretty well, when they're all applauding their tyrannical fascist leader into position, to take over the fleet or whatever it's called in Star Wars. So it's a good analogy. It's a good example. And you should say, therefore, the smaller the sphere of influence that these structures have, the less of a danger it will be, and the more likely it is that the people in that region, in that area, can take care of the problem. I mean, that's why countries like Switzerland, they have all the men have a machine gun in their house. They're given one by the state as a means of defending both for foreign and domestic enemies. So there has to be a modality where the men stand up and say no when they've had enough, right? And do what needs to be done to preserve and keep those people out that are not unfit to take over and rule, basically. Yeah. Well, absolutely. But I think one of the most amusing things is that apparently in America the number one murder weapon is the humble hammer. Well, exactly. Yeah. So I joke that if I ever murder somebody, I'll use a rock or a stick, because then the government's going to have a hell of a time trying to ban those. Yeah, exactly. I know. Yeah. Yeah. Well, Warren, I think we should begin to round things up here for this time. And there's a few more things I want to ask you here, obviously, about the case and everything. But before we do that, let's make sure just that we give out all the information, of course, where people can go to read more about your story, your case, if you will, and you have a video on the website, you have contact details there, you have a book available. Just give us the information on where people can go to find it. Okay, well, if you type in Dark Side of Finland, one word, lowercase, it will be the first link, and there you can read my book for free, and you can watch my video. Very good. And you do have people can buy the book as well, correct? To support you, to help you out financially in your case, is that correct? Yeah, they can. I've got a box of books here, and that I've had printed, and I'd be happy to mail them to people. Yeah. And there's information about that on the website, obviously under the book section, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, very good. Well, I mean, first of all, Warren, I'm just so sorry for everything that you've experienced and gone through in the last, well, what is it now then? 12, 13, almost 13 years, right? Or even a little bit more, 14, 15 years.
Oh no, end of 2001. Well, it started in, it started in
99, really, right?
Yeah. But look, I don't have any ill will towards Kaisu. If I could wave my magic wand, I would, make. Well, I don't know. I would make my children, bring my children back to Australia, and I would make sure that no harm came to her, if I could. But I would certainly wouldn't allow her to, to harm any more children.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah,
I understand.
Yeah.
Is there anything else that you want to mention, that is pertinent to the case that we've been talking about, or something that you'd seek help with, or anything else, basically, before we round things up for this time, Warren? The floor is yours, if you so want to.
Well, I'm sure I'll think of something else to say, Henrik, but nothing off the top of my head. It's been great to have this opportunity. Thank you very much. And I think I'm sure there's 1,000 things I haven't said, but they are in the book, and only a fraction of them are in the book. Actually, I could literally write an encyclopedia about these people.
Yeah.
Take them name by name, and if I could get all the documents, they'd probably stand, I don't know, 6 feet tall,
Yeah.
But my website is darksideoffinland.wordpress.com.
We'll send people there in the meantime, Warren, and of course I want to thank you as well for your time today. We really appreciate it. Is of course one word you could use, but it's such a horrendous story, but it's so important that we get to talk about it and discuss it, and these various examples that do occur in different parts of the world, in some cases where we don't expect it, of course, but you're one of those cases where you've kind of, in my view, you've kind of fallen a little bit in between the cracks, if you will, because of this international thing on top of it, and then, of course, the scenario in Finland with psychiatry and the medication and everything else, which is just horrendous. But you've done an excellent job in laying it out for us and detailing and telling us the timeline of the story. And all I want to say to you, Warren, is to keep up the good spirit. Of course, keep fighting, and don't give up either. Okay.
No, Henrik. This is they wanted to fight, they got one. Because I do like to fight. I like to fight to make the world a better place. And they've just made it personal for me. I've always been trying to do what I can to make the world a better place, but they've just made it personal, and they've forced me to make to devote all my spare time to it.
Yeah, I understand. Okay, well, very good. Thank you so much again, Warren, for joining us. We really appreciate it. Thank you.
All right, Henrik, and you too. Thank you very much.
That concludes Red Ice Radio for today. Thank you, everyone, for listening. And these are important stories and examples of how people are treated in a machine-like colony that has no obligation to justify their actions or decisions to anybody but themselves, where people go on automatic and think that what they do is justified because they are on the side of authority. Well, this is the danger with these bureaucratic governments, and worse is if you get enough wrong people in one place, and the damage they can do with the blessing of the state can be monumental. We'll be back in a few days with Nathan Fraser. Tune in again at redicecreations.com and redicemembers.com as we continue our inquiries. Thank you, and take care.